Welcome to the Commonwealth Policy Center's Candidate Forum. There's an open seat for Kentucky's Auditor of Public Accounts, as the current auditor, Mike Harmon, is term limited and running for governor. Two Republican candidates are vying for this position, and one of them is joining us in the CPC studio today. Allison Ball, current state treasurer, welcome to our forum.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Hey, you have served as state treasurer for nearly 7 years. And I guess the first question to ask, since you're running for another office, are there certain experiences or things you learned in the capacity of Office of State Treasurer that you can translate into the next position for state auditor?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. In fact, it's actually a pretty common thing to see people go from treasurer's offices to auditor's offices and vice versa. And it's because they use a lot of the same skill sets. Mm-hmm. So I always describe the treasurer's role as a watchdog role. It's a role that protects our taxpayer dollars. It's that front end watchdog, really guards the bank account. So the auditor does exactly what it sounds like. The auditor audits. Once money has been spent, the auditor reviews and makes sure that people were using the money the way they were supposed to. And if not, then make sure those people are held accountable. So they're both watchdogs. One is at the front end, one is at the back end. So I've had the privilege and the honor to serve as that front watchdog in the treasurer's office now for about 7 years. I'm finishing up my last year, and I was really praying about what to do next. I really felt like that God was leading me to continue seeking public service. It's been a great honor to serve that way, and looking at what's my skill set. And then just seeking God's direction. I felt like auditor was where I was being led to run for.
So tell us a little bit more. A lot of the listeners and viewers might not have even been aware that there is a state auditor. Tell us what the Auditor of Public Accounts does.
Yeah, happy to. So I like to describe it as something of a statewide inspector general, because that kind of makes sense to people. Mm-hmm. So the auditor does audit just like it sounds like, and people kind of have a familiarity of auditing. Usually that sounds scary to people. In this instance, the auditor audits government. So state government, local governments. There are some things that are regularly occurring. They're always checking to make sure everybody's doing things right. That happens all the time. But then there's also special audits. Okay. So if there's something that is peculiar or just something that you want to just take a closer look at, the auditor has that ability to just do a deeper dive. And that's what I love about the auditor's office. So the treasurer's office is a real-time, front lines, quick decisions position. The auditor gets to take his or her time really looking at something and figuring out was the money used correctly, and then did you use the right processes? So it's money and then the processes that are in place.
So I noticed previous auditors will announce when they are going to do a drawing. They cannot do every single public agency every year. That's too big a task. You're talking about 120 fiscal courts. There's many more cities across the Commonwealth. Sure. Where they're dealing with public tax dollars, and I've seen where Mike Harmon, they draw names out of the hat and they choose which counties, which cities are audited. And this is really part of, as you mentioned, being a public watchdog. You're making sure that public tax dollars are being used appropriately. Have you seen anything from previous auditors that you'd like to improve upon? Any areas that maybe could be done differently?
Well, what I love about the potential of serving in this role is, and I'll be following Mike Harmon, who's been there for nearly 8 years. And it's good to follow somebody who's good. It's always better to follow somebody who's good. And you can always take what they've done as a foundation and then continue to build on that. So it would be my own office. I do things the way I feel like that I want to do it in the time that I have, but I would absolutely be building on what he's done. So that's the best way to do it, is somebody who's good and then follow that person. And because he's done good work, it allows me to take things to the next step. And I feel like I'll have an opportunity to do that. One thing I'm excited about, and I think there's a great opportunity for, is to prevent problems at the front end. I think there's a lot of opportunities for working with local governments. Having served as treasurer, I know a lot of the people across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I know a lot of the elected officials, and we have a lot of people who really do have the right attitude and heart going into public service. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that they have the tools and the training to do the right thing. Yeah. We don't want to catch people in an audit because they made mistakes. We want to prevent things in the front end, and we want to, if someone is doing something nefariously, then they have to be held accountable, and that is correct. Right. But we want to catch things or prevent things, just help things begin well and end well. So I think there's a great opportunity to do some of that in the role of auditor.
So what I'm hearing from you when you talk about being preventative or doing things on the front end, are you talking about training, education? education, things of that
Yes,
nature?
exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing is that I have learned, having been in public service for a while, you have people from all walks of life who are now serving as elected officials. And that's wonderful because you've got perspectives from different areas, from business, from education, from the ministry, all these different areas. They may not always have the tools when it comes to audits and financial matters. So would you want us to try that one again? We're good. Okay. So they may not always have training in this area. And what I think is a great opportunity to help people on that front end, making sure their staff is trained, that we do everything's right from the beginning, and hopefully that will even save money in the long run because you're doing it right.
You'd mentioned the ability to get to know a lot of other public officials across the Commonwealth. Have you had any endorsements? Of course, the governor's race is on the ballot, and there are some candidates that received a number of endorsements. I'm wondering, is that something that you've sought as you pursue this seat?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have the benefit of having served 2 terms now, finishing up my 2nd term. So I haven't done a lot of work seeking endorsements. Now I've had people come up to me, and I'm always so grateful when that happens. There are groups that I have sought endorsements for, and that's Kentucky Right to Life, because I've always been a strong believer in life, and that's actually as a kid, that was one of the things that caused me to be interested in policy and politics and thinking about running for office someday. I was the first Kentucky constitutional officer to give birth while serving in office, the first one to do it twice. So I think God's given me a unique platform to be able to talk about life and the importance of life and the importance of motherhood and the importance of the family. So that one is near and dear to my heart, and I do everything I can to support pro-life causes. It's not always a natural fit with the treasurer's office, but it doesn't matter because it's something that I believe in, and that would be true in the auditor's office too. And there's probably more areas in the auditor's office to get involved in some pro-life issues. But that's a group that I got their endorsement, and I'm so grateful for that. And then, there's other individuals and people that do it. I'm always grateful when they do, but it's nice when you've run twice and a lot of people at this point. A top vote getter both times I ran. So that's encouraging to have that kind of backing in the background.
Very good. On your website, and I knew this before I looked at your website, but you are a champion for financial literacy in the Commonwealth. When I read something like that, you're championing financial literacy, I'm reading into this a little bit, but does this mean that there are a lot of people that are illiterate when it comes to finances and how to manage a budget and that kind of thing?
Sure. Well, so I was a bankruptcy attorney before I was treasurer. I was a prosecutor before I was a bankruptcy attorney. But as practicing bankruptcy law, I really got to see that a lot of people don't have training when it comes to their finances. They may be people that work hard and do well in so many things, but this is an area that they've just not been trained in. So, and that's not been a major part of our area of focus when it comes to education in years past. So one of my proudest achievements as treasurer is I pushed to get a bill passed to make it a requirement that when you graduate from high school, you have a course or program on financial literacy so that you know what to do with your money. We know that when you're an adult, you're going to make decisions on money. You may not have to deal with chemistry. You may not do a lot with Spanish, but you are going to deal with your money. Sure. So that is, like I said, one of my proudest achievements. That is now the law of the land. The current junior class, by the time they are seniors, they're going to be the first class that's going to be required to have financial literacy training in school as part of their formal education. So I believe that's going to have a generational impact. I also launched what's called the Kentucky Financial Empowerment Commission. And when we launched the requirement that you have to have this in school, at that point in time, Kentucky was a little more strapped for cash than it is now. And we're trying to figure out how can we provide this education and this training without putting a greater burden on taxpayers. So we launched the Kentucky Financial Empowerment Commission, which is a quasi-governmental agency that's allowed to receive money from the private sector. There are a lot of people that care about this issue. So credit unions and banks jumped in and they said, hey, we'll make sure schools have what they need, and other groups, to learn financial literacy principles. So I'm very, very proud of that. It's lives in the Treasury, so it's something that won't necessarily carry over with me, but I'm always a believer in financial literacy and always trying to encourage people in this area. I actually had a women's conference in 2021 because women were particularly impacted in 2021. I think that women in the workforce dropped to about 19, I believe it was 86 levels. So I wanted to do something for women in particular, just to encourage them. So many of them were homeschooling their kids for the first time and then maybe trying to work. And it was a difficult, challenging time. So we had this women's conference virtually from Paducah to Pikeville. We had over 600 women registered to participate. And it was just great fun. And I have thought that might be something I can continue because, right now, I'm the only Republican woman who's an elected official at a statewide level. Who knows what's going to happen as we progress on, but there aren't a lot of women who are involved in statewide statewide office. So it may be something that I can continue. This doesn't necessarily live in the treasurer's office, and I think it fits pretty nicely with the auditor's office if the auditor's a woman.
Yeah, Allison, you mentioned a lot of women who were adversely impacted from COVID and the shutdown. I'm thinking of the single mom who, when daycares were shut down, they couldn't send their kid to daycare, or when schools were shut down, one of the parents had to stay home to take care of the kids. Did your office, or did you do anything to engage on behalf of citizens who were hurt from the shutdown?
Oh, absolutely. We were actively involved during the shutdown. Some of it was just administratively running the function of government and helping with that. But of course, I was very involved when the governor was sending KSB police to, and this is a little bit different from what you talked about, but it was COVID related. When he was sending KSB, he was using taxpayer dollars to send KSB to stop people from going to church. And as the treasurer, it's my job to protect our dollars. So I stepped in and said that was an unconstitutional expenditure and testified before the General Assembly to make sure that that was stopped and didn't happen again. So that's probably the most prominent thing that I did from as far as the public was aware. But there were many things that we were involved in during that time. Unclaimed property is one of the things that I do as treasurer.
That was my next question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but tell us about that.
So unclaimed
what
property,
is that, first of all?
It's basically the statewide lost and found. So it's your money and you've lost track of it somehow, or is your parents, your grandparents, something like that.
So maybe money in a bank or in a CD or financial institution of some kind?
Yes, you may own shares of stock. You may have overpaid an electric bill or put down a deposit on an apartment. There's a variety of ways that you could have lost track of your money. So the way that works is if you've lost track of your money and the government, whoever's holding it for you doesn't know how to get you anymore, it turns over to the state. And I'm the custodian of it, and it's my job to get it back to you. So I returned $159 million while I've been in office. It's more than any other treasurer. And we really pushed that. And we actually, when we were limited to just essentials of government, we made sure we kept that part of the office running because money was tight for a lot of people during that time. We wanted to make sure people got their money back to them. And we streamlined things and became more efficient. And we actually returned at that period of time more individual claims in 2020 than we'd ever done up to that point in time. So that was something we made sure. And, if you were a single mom and, you may have perhaps had to quit your job or pull back on your job and take care of your kids, we're really trying to make sure they knew about unclaimed property because a lot of those people did have money they didn't know about. I remember we had one, it was a dad who had lost his job and he had about $30,000 of unclaimed property he did not know about. And he came to the treasury to get his check and he was just crying because he said he didn't know what he was going to do. And we told him, God has provided for you. Is what we told him. So, every now and then you get these moments to kind of speak into a person's real life. And so that's what we got to do.
That's awesome. Awesome. I want to go back to your website. You say in your website that you're committed to fiscal responsibility, championing good governance measures, and implementing common sense economic policies. And these principles here, these statements that you made would translate into the auditor's office. But tell us specifically, what are some examples of how you've done this in your capacity as state treasurer? How have you been committed to fiscal responsibility, championing good governance measures, or implementing common sense economic policies?
Sure. Well, and we've touched a little bit on that. I think financial literacy fits nicely into all of those categories. If you are good with your money, you know how to manage your money, you are going to elect people who are similarly minded. You're not going to elect people who grow debt, who are unwise with their money. And I think, if you've got a citizenry that really understands those principles, then your government's going to be better. So I believe in that on every level. And I'm always trying to encourage things that are like that. I have gotten involved from time to time when it comes to tax policy. I really do want to grow business because I feel like that helps families. You're going to get more money in people's pockets if they've got a good, solid job, and that's good for everybody. So I have gotten involved in economics. I'm definitely a limited government person. I think government needs to be small, and you need to protect people's liberty and freedom. And I believe in the free market. So, from time to time, I really get to weigh in a very direct and clear way on those kinds of issues, often with tax policy. Right now, we actually, Kentucky is just the treasurer, me, signed on a letter just this week with several other treasurers pushing back against the Biden administration's plan to penalize people that have good credit scores for putting deposits down on houses. And they're going to actually end up paying more on their mortgages than people who don't have good credit scores. So basically, it's income redistribution. And if you believe in financial literacy, you're punishing people for working hard and doing well. So from time to time, I actually get to weigh in on policies that are not wise policies. They're actually harming things that should be praised and encouraged.
That was one of my other questions, Allison, was that story broke on Fox News yesterday. It said, began by saying that state treasurers and other top finance officials from 27 states urged President Biden to end what they said was his unconscionable policy of forcing people with good credit scores to subsidize mortgage loans of higher risk borrowers, and warned Biden that Biden's plan would be a disaster. Was that a letter that you signed on to?
Yes, yeah, yes, exactly.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because of course, this was apparently, I like to think of the best of people. I'm a conservative and want smaller government and responsible government. But this was born, I think, out of good intentions to help those who might not have been able to get a loan, to get a first-time home loan, maybe.
Sure, and there are other ways to get, if you're struggling some with the income that you have and you want to get a home, there are other ways to be able to do that without penalizing people that are careful with their money and have worked very hard to have good credit scores.
Yeah.
So this was.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. What do you mean by penalizing?
They're actually paying more money on their mortgage than somebody else who's not. So like this is literally a penalty. I read that it's anticipated there will be an average of $30,000 more that somebody with high, in the 700s credit scores who worked very hard for that, put down a 20% deposit on their mortgage. Those people should be exactly what we're trying to emulate. We want to encourage that kind of behavior. And instead, we're charging them more money. So that way, people that have not done as well, have not been as careful, and for a variety of reasons, they pay less money. And that just goes against everything that we should be doing as a society. It's not good.
I agree. Allison, you took a stand earlier this year against ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. You published a list of 11 financial companies that were engaged in energy company boycotts. This inordinately impacts Kentucky. We're an energy producing state. 7.8% of our total employment is related to the energy sector. Speak a little bit more on that.
Happy to. So this is one of the big causes that I've been working on for the last year and a half or so. And it's an issue that's important, not just for the treasurer's office, but for the auditor's office, because the auditor has a pension oversight role. Okay. So ESG, like you just said, stands for environmental, social, and governance. And the way I describe this to people, because a lot of people aren't familiar with it, is once upon a time, investments are about getting a good return, especially when it comes to your pensions. It's about making sure when somebody retires at the end of their career, they have money for them. They put money into it, that they get money back. So it's about getting good returns. Yeah. So the ESG movement has said, no, the focus should not be as much on getting good returns. It's nice if that happens, but that's not the focus. The focus is on using money as leverage to reward or punish companies or to push certain social outcomes. And all of them are progressive, left-wing, ideological outcomes. The E part has been the big one. It's been the dominant one lately. It's not limited to E, but let's just talk about the E for a minute. So the E is environmental. And as you said, it really does impact Kentucky because the whole move of the E part lately has been to push the fossil fuel industry out of business. So the coal industry, oil industry, gas industries that exist in Kentucky and I would still say our signature industries in Kentucky. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. I'm from the coal fields. My great uncle was involved in pipelaying for the oil and gas industry. We need these industries in Kentucky. They're lifelines for us, but the country needs them. We need inexpensive and easily accessible energy. So there's a lot of reasons why this is bad. So last year there was a bill pushed that put the treasurer's office in the front lines of this issue, and the General Assembly, we refer to it as the fossil fuel boycott bill. And it says if you are actively involved in the E part, you're a financial institution, you're an asset manager, you're a business that is trying to boycott the fossil fuel industry, then we're not going to include you. Kentucky's not going to include you in our pensions, in our portfolios, and we're not going to have a government contract with you. So this is a pretty serious bill. It means business. And earlier this year, I issued a list, like you just said, of 11 businesses that we determined based on Kentucky law were actively involved in boycotting the fossil fuel industry. And they're big ones. It's BlackRock, it's JP Morgan Chase. It's a lot of names that people would be familiar with. Right now, they're in a period of time where we're trying to get them to change their ways. And we're actually having some good conversations with some of these businesses. Some of them I think are not going to change their ways. But we're trying to tell them, look, America needs energy. Kentucky needs energy. This is important to Kentucky. This should be important to America. It's important to the world. America needs energy independence. Don't try to push the coal industry out of business. Don't try to push the oil and gas industry out of business. This is very short-sighted. It's very foolish. And so at the end of that period, if they maintain that they are going to continue boycotting the fossil fuel industry, then we're going to we're going to divest ourselves from them, and we're not going to have a government contract. So it's pretty serious.
So is that the authority of the legislature to divest itself from investing in those companies, or to cut them out of I mean, Kentucky has billions of dollars in pensions, and these companies we're invested in some of them. So
Yes, we are.
Who would that fall on? Would it be the treasurer's role, the legislature's role, auditor's role? Who would make that decision?
So the General Assembly gave me the authority to list, these are the companies that are actively involved in boycotts. And then the treasurer's office is actually the one that's supposed to be engaged with these businesses to find out, are they going to continue this boycott? Do they have anything to say about it? Do they disagree? Most of our information came from either publicly made available statements or from themselves, because we actually inquired with several of them, are you engaging? We think you're engaging in a fossil fuel boycott. If you disagree, tell us why. So we're in that period, and the General Assembly gave me that authority to be in that period right now.
Okay.
And then the next step would be to tell the agencies that are involved in these, hey, you need to begin the process of finding somebody else to use. So that's where we're at right now. Now that's the very discrete E, that's the environmental part. Now this year, there was another bill passed that said, and I think this is really important for people to know about, it actually made Kentucky the strongest anti-ESG state in the nation. Okay. And it says our investments have to be based purely on returns, pecuniary reasons, money. You've got to be focused on, is this a good financial investment? You cannot invest based on political, ideological reasons. Sure. So I think this is a significant step. We actually have several other states that are beginning to do other things like us. Ours is the strongest in the nation. And there are others that are starting to do this too. And I think this is going to really, and we're actually seeing this. We're seeing some of these companies that have been, for whatever reasons, playing with using politics to push certain social agendas in money. They're beginning to, some of them think, oh, wait a minute, some people don't like this, and this is affecting our bottom dollar. And so, money does talk, and we're starting to see some changes. So this actually has real world impact.
Allison, we're running out of time. If you're elected to Kentucky's next Auditor of Public Accounts, what would be a priority or two of yours if you're elected?
Yeah, great question. So the ESG movement is a priority. I want to make sure that I continue fighting that, because that is a serious and dangerous issue right now. Another issue that is discrete to Kentucky that I think is important. So I'm from Eastern Kentucky, and many people remember we had the floods that happened there last year. You're from Western Kentucky. There were the tornadoes that happened there about a year and a half ago. The governor set up two funds, the East Kentucky Relief Fund and the West Kentucky Relief Fund. And as treasurer, I can see what money is in that bank account. And I had some concerns actually for a year and a half on the West Kentucky Relief Funds, that there really weren't oversight rules in place because it was outside of the normal appropriations standards. So I pushed for the General Assembly to put some rules in place. That's happened now. But there's things that have happened with those accounts that have given me reason to be concerned. Several checks, we delivered them to the Public Protection Cabinet, and they then sent it to people who they determined were victims of the tornadoes, and they ended up not being victims of the tornadoes.
How does that happen? That has been in the news, by the way.
Yes, it has. It has. So just to elaborate that on a little bit, so the Public Protection Cabinet has been the entity under the governor that was in charge of distributing the Western Kentucky Relief Funds, as well as the Eastern Kentucky Relief Funds. So last December, they made a request to us to deliver to them about $10 million of checks, and then they would send those with a letter to people they determined were victims of the tornadoes. We immediately started to get phone calls from people saying, hey, I got this check. I don't know why I got it, because I'm not a victim of the tornadoes. We actually had people from Northern Kentucky tell us, hey, I got this check. So they're not even from the region. Wow. So that just confirmed the concerns that I had, and I've been saying for months, is that there really aren't oversight rules in place.
So if I could interject, were these just clerical mistakes, or was there something nefarious going on?
So I don't know that it was nefarious, but I do think it confirms that there needed to be oversight. So the Public Protection Cabinet said, hey, we got this list from FEMA and from insurance companies. FEMA said we would never have made these mistakes. So you've got two groups that are pointing fingers at each other. And it just confirms to me, you got to have rules. You got to have, especially these are funds that are donated. These aren't even government funds. So people have entrusted this money to Kentucky. It's a very unusual system. So I actually said a year and a half ago, I would like to see the Western Kentucky Relief Fund subject to an audit. The Public Protection Cabinet said, no, thank you. We actually have a letter from them answering in that way. So I think one of the first things that does need to be done is we need to have an audit of those funds. Okay. There's actually still quite a lot of money left. About half of the money that's ever been raised in the Western Kentucky Relief Fund, here we are a year and a half out, half of it has not been spent at all. So as treasurer, what I can see is I can see money coming in and coming out. As auditor, I could do a deeper dive to see where did this money go?
Sure.
What kind of mechanics did you have in place? And the General Assembly has cured some of this because they passed a bill just this last session, which I'm grateful for. But I think this needs to be audited.
So I'm hearing a commitment from you. If you were like
Oh,
an
absolutely.
auditor of public accounts,
Yeah.
you would audit to make sure that money's going where it should be going.
Absolutely.
In
Yes,
both of
that's-
those relief funds, the
Yes,
Eastern Kentucky
and the West
flooding and
Virginia.
the West Kentucky.
Yes, absolutely.
tornadoes.
That's one of the things I think that needs to be looked at right away.
Allison, last question here, and we're just about out of time. What kind of qualities do you look for in a potential employee to serve with you in your office?
Sure. So, my Christian faith is very important to me. My relationship with Jesus is important to me. And I usually have a conversation if I don't do open hires for my executive team, the ones that are the political appointees, the ones I get to hire. I really look for people that I've heard good things about, that I know something about. And I usually have a conversation with them about who I am. And I'll tell them, my relationship with Jesus is the most important thing to me. And I really believe it's important for me to be integrated in my faith, that it impacts everything that I do and who I am in every way. So I always make sure if I'm going to hire somebody that they know that about me, because I want to make sure that I would like it if they are comfortable and support and believe in something like that too. So I have that conversation with people whenever I hire them. Like, this is who I am. What do you think about working for somebody like that? I also tell them that, conservative principles, I really believe that they work. I ran for office to advance conservative principles. I was an attorney beforehand, and you make more money as an attorney and you've got less stress. So I'm doing something because I believe it. And I want to make sure if someone's with me, they believe in those conservative principles too. Okay. And of course, integrity and hard work and honesty and loyalty, those things are important too.
Very good. You've got 1 minute to tell the voters why they should vote for you as Auditor of Public Accounts on May the 16th. Actually, early voting starts a couple days before that, does it not?
Yes, and some people have actually been voting. If you're absentee, you're voting now. So, so it has begun. Well, it has been a tremendous honor to serve you as Kentucky State Treasurer. I've been your watchdog of taxpayer dollars, and I'm asking you please to send me back to Frankfort to continue to be a watchdog, this time a different watchdog, the watchdog on the back end. And I can continue the fight against ESG. I think that is a dangerous and serious issue right now in Kentucky and in the world. And I can continue to make sure that our money is being used the way it's supposed to be used. I was a prosecutor for 4 years. I was a bankruptcy attorney for 2. I am your watchdog right now. I know how to do this job. I know how to be a watchdog. I know how to hold people accountable. I know how to investigate and get this job done. So I ask you, please give me the tremendous honor to serve you again, this time as state auditor.
All right, Allison Ball, thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you too.